Who was Edgar Cayce? The Sleeping Prophet's dark origin story. What if I told you that a simple farm boy from Kentucky could diagnose deadly diseases while completely unconscious? That he could see into people's past lives, predict their future, and prescribe remedies for ailments he'd never studied? But here's the truly disturbing part. Edgar Cayce had no memory of any of it when he woke up. And the entities speaking through him? They weren't always human. Welcome to the dark origin story of America's most mysterious psychic. The year was 1901. 24-year-old Edgar Cayce lay motionless on a simple wooden table in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. His body was rigid, his breathing shallow, his eyes rolled back into his head like a corpse. The room was thick with tension as a small crowd of witnesses watched in horrified fascination. Then, something impossible happened. In a voice that wasn't his own, deeper, more authoritative, almost otherworldly, Edgar began speaking about a complete stranger's medical condition with surgical precision. He described internal organs he'd never seen, prescribed treatments from medical books he'd never read, and revealed intimate details about the patient's life that no living soul should have known. But when Edgar awakened 20 minutes later, he remembered absolutely nothing. It was as if something else had taken control of his body, used his voice, and then vanished without a trace. This wasn't Edgar's first time experiencing something this strange, and it certainly wouldn't be his last. The disturbing childhood, Edgar. Cayce's journey into the supernatural began long before that fateful day in 1901. Born in 1877 on a tobacco farm in rural Kentucky, Edgar was what you might call different. Even as a young child, he claimed to see and speak with entities that others couldn't perceive. His family initially dismissed these claims as childhood imagination. But then strange things began happening around Edgar that couldn't be explained away. At age 6, Edgar told his parents that his deceased grandfather regularly visited him. Not in dreams, in broad daylight. His grandfather, Edgar claimed, would sit on his bed and have full conversations with him about life, death, and things that a 6-year-old shouldn't possibly understand. The family was disturbed, but they assumed Edgar would outgrow these visions. They were wrong. By age 13, Edgar's supernatural encounters had evolved into something far more unsettling. He discovered that if he slept with books under his pillow, he would somehow absorb their entire contents by morning. This wasn't normal studying. This was something else entirely. Something that defied every law of nature and learning. Teachers were baffled when Edgar, a poor student who struggled with basic reading, would suddenly demonstrate perfect knowledge of complex subjects he'd never studied. But Edgar couldn't explain how he knew these things. The information would simply appear in his mind, as if downloaded by an invisible force. His parents were becoming genuinely frightened. What was happening to their son? The transformation, the event that would change Edgar's life forever, occurred when he was just 24 years old. Edgar had been working as a photographer and insurance salesman, trying to live a normal life despite his unusual experiences. But normalcy wasn't in Edgar's destiny. One morning, Edgar woke up completely unable to speak. His voice had vanished overnight, reduced to barely a whisper. Local doctors were baffled. They could find nothing physically wrong with his throat or vocal cords. Specialists were consulted. Treatments were attempted. Nothing worked. For nearly a year, Edgar lived in this nightmarish silence, watching his career and social life crumble. He was desperate, isolated, and beginning to lose hope. That's when a traveling hypnotist named Hart suggested something radical. He proposed putting Edgar into a hypnotic trance to see if his voice might return while unconscious. Edgar, having nothing left to lose, agreed to try. What happened next would haunt Edgar for the rest of his life. Under hypnosis, Edgar's voice returned, but it wasn't quite his voice anymore. Speaking in that same deep, authoritative tone that would later become famous, Edgar diagnosed his own condition. He explained that his vocal cords had become paralyzed due to psychological stress, and he prescribed a specific treatment. involving increased blood circulation to the affected areas. When Edgar awoke, his voice had returned. But something else had awakened too. Something that had been dormant inside him was now fully conscious and ready to emerge. The hypnotist, amazed by what had occurred, convinced Edgar to try the technique again, this time to help others. Edgar was hesitant. There was something unsettling about losing complete control of his body and mind, something that felt dangerous, but the results were undeniable. The entities speak. As Edgar began giving what he called readings for other people, disturbing patterns started to emerge. While in his trance state, Edgar would claim to be accessing what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library containing every soul's complete history across all lifetimes. But more troubling were the entities that seemed to speak through him. Edgar would often refer to mysterious sources of information during his readings. Sometimes he claimed to be channeling the souls of deceased doctors. Other times he spoke as if accessing the knowledge of advanced beings from other dimensions. Witnesses reported that Edgar's facial expressions would change dramatically during readings, as if different personalities were taking control of his body. The most disturbing aspect, Edgar had absolutely no control over these entities or what they might reveal. During one particularly unsettling reading, the entity speaking through Edgar revealed dark secrets about a client's past that no living person could have known. Family scandals, hidden crimes, buried traumas, all exposed by this otherworldly intelligence that had commandeered Edgar's unconscious mind. The client was so shaken by the accuracy of these revelations that they fled the session and never returned. Edgar began to question whether he was truly helping people or opening doorways that should remain closed. Were these entities benevolent healers, as they claimed, or something more sinister, masquerading as forces of good? If you're finding Edgar's story as fascinating and disturbing as I am, make sure to subscribe to The Sleeping Prophet for more dark mysteries from the world's most famous psychic. We're just getting started. The truth about Edgar's abilities became even more complicated as his reputation grew. People traveled from across the country seeking his help, and Edgar felt compelled to assist them despite his growing unease about the source of his knowledge. But success came with a terrible price. The dark side emerges. As Edgar's fame spread, so did the disturbing incidents surrounding his readings. People who received readings from Edgar began reporting strange occurrences in their own lives. Some claimed to experience paranormal activity after their sessions. Others reported vivid, terrifying dreams featuring the same entities that seemed to speak through Edgar. More troubling were the cases where Edgar's readings seemed to attract negative spiritual attention to his clients. Several people reported feeling followed by unseen presences after their sessions with Edgar. Some experienced poltergeist activity in their homes. A few claimed to have been contacted by the same mysterious voices that spoke through Edgar. But outside of his controlled trance environment, Edgar himself began experiencing increasingly disturbing phenomena. He would sometimes wake up from readings with unexplained injuries, scratches, bruises, marks that hadn't been there when he entered the trance. His family reported that Edgar would sometimes speak in different languages during readings, including dead languages he had never studied. Most disturbing of all were the prophecies. The entities speaking through Edgar began making predictions about future events, many of which were dark, catastrophic, and eerily specific. They spoke of wars, natural disasters, and social upheavals with a level of detail that suggested they weren't just predicting the future, they were planning it. Edgar's wife, Gertrude, became increasingly concerned about the toll these sessions were taking on her husband. She noticed that after particularly intense readings, Edgar would be weak, disoriented, and sometimes couldn't remember basic details about his own life for hours afterward. It was as if each reading was allowing these entities to take a little piece of Edgar with them when they departed. The price of power. Despite his growing concern, Edgar found himself unable to stop giving readings. Whether it was compassion for those seeking help, financial necessity, or something more sinister compelling him, Edgar continued channeling these mysterious entities for over 40 years. The cost was enormous. Edgar's health deteriorated rapidly in his later years. He suffered from exhaustion, depression, and strange ailments that doctors couldn't diagnose. Those closest to him noticed that Edgar seemed to be aging at an accelerated rate, as if each reading was literally draining his life force. In his final years, Edgar became increasingly paranoid about the entities that spoke through him. He confided to close friends that he sometimes felt like a prisoner in his own body, unsure whether his thoughts were his own or influenced by the otherworldly intelligence that had made its home in his mind. Edgar Cayce died in 1945, taking with him the secrets of his supernatural abilities. But the entities that spoke through him left behind over 14,000 documented readings, a massive archive of otherworldly knowledge that continues to influence people today. The question remains, was Edgar Cayce a gifted healer who used his abilities to help humanity? Or was he an unwitting conduit for forces beyond human understanding? Forces that may have had their own agenda for our world, as we explore more of Edgar Cayce's most disturbing readings and predictions in future episodes. One thing becomes clear. The line between healing and haunting is thinner than we might want to believe. Subscribe to The Sleeping Prophet if you want to dive deeper into Edgar Cayce's most shocking readings, failed prophecies, and the dark legacy he left behind. And remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The Sleeping Prophet may be gone, but the entities that spoke through him, they might still be out there, waiting for the next willing vessel to carry their message into our world. Sweet dreams.